Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you to today's Yukon Global at Home Spring Roll Making Workshop. My name is Matt Larson, and I work for the Office of Global Affairs. I will be facilitating today's session led by Tam Vu, a freshman undergraduate student studying political science and economics, and a member of the Vietnamese Student Association. For her demonstration, she will show the audience a classic variation of the Vietnamese spring roll with boiled shrimp, peanut butter sauce, rice noodles, pork, and veggies, and will highlight how you can personalize your spring roll with ingredient substitutions.
Hi everyone. So I'll start off by saying that these spring rolls are just how my family does them, and we do it in several other ways as well. But this is probably the closest to a traditional spring roll that I know of. So can't wait to get started. So I'm gonna present the ingredients first of all. So we have center cut boneless pork loin. Um, it's so it's not really important to get the center cut or anything like that. As long as you have boneless pork, I think you should be fine. There's not a lot of fat on this, as you can tell. Um, but that's just how my family prefers it, trying to stay skinny. So this is what we have for pork. Then we have some rice noodles. You can honestly get any type of rice noodles. We've tried a few different brands, and it doesn't really matter what type of brand it is. You can get Americanized version or whatever. As long as they're rice noodles, you're fine. Um, and then we have boiled shrimp. They're deveined, and we cut them in half, and we take off the peels, and you would put two in a spring roll. And then for veggies, we have red leaf lettuce right here, mint in the corner, mango, and cucumber. So I feel like vegetables are probably a really big thing that people want variants in. So for mango, if you don't like mango, get Granny Smith apples and cut them really thinly, and that's a good replacement. For mint, you can use catnip. Sounds a little funky, but it works. As long as you just use one leaf instead of a whole stick of it, you'll be fine. And then for red leaf lettuce, as long as you have a green, a leafy green, you should be fine. Sometimes we use spinach. When you saute lettuce, it tastes kind of similar to sauteed spinach anyway. So with a variation where you saute your veggies, then it doesn't really matter. But for a fresh one like this, you can kind of taste the difference, but spinach still tastes great. In terms of proteins, if you don't like pork or if you don't like having to eat meat, the different type of variation you can do is fried tofu. So you'd take normal tofu and you could probably deep fry it, and you cut it into slices and you could put it in. You could put it in with some soy sauce and things like that for some flavor, and that's how you'll get some of that in. So before we start making the spring roll, we are gonna make a sauce. So I'm gonna be moving the camera over to the stovetop, and I'll be showing you guys how I make peanut butter sauce for spring rolls. Okay, so I have a pot and some water. So you put in just a little a little dash of water, like a seasoning of water, and some peanut butter. And you'd wait for the water and the peanut butter to get kind of mixed together. The main thing about the sauce is the peanut butter. So you wouldn't want to skimp out on it. It's good for you. This is how much I'm using. And if I want more, I'll add more later. But for this amount of water, you're using a big glob of peanut butter. I don't usually use measurements because I adjust as I go anyway. But what you're looking for is, so you know how in French, cuisine or something, when you make a sauce, you want to at the end of the spoon to see if it's thick enough. This isn't French, but it still works the same. So you can totally do that. As long as it's kind of thick and you dip it and then you have like a good amount on your sauce thing, then you'll be fine. You also add like I'd say like a pinch of flour as well to thicken it up. Sometimes like it just doesn't taste the same without like it being really thick. So we add like a little pinch of flour while you do it, and it should be like added in the beginning. If you do it like while it's boiling or whatever with flour, the flour will clump together, and you'll just be stuck there like kneading the sides of your pot, and that's like why would you want that? So you heat it up and you'd keep stirring. It doesn't take that long, so but it does take long if it's completely silent. So I'll take this time to be advertising VSA. So VSA is the group that I'm a part of. VSA is the Vietnamese Student Association. It's Vietnamese like we focus on Vietnamese culture, but it's not Vietnamese exclusive. Like that's the most important part. It's not Vietnamese exclusive. We have people. Our president is Korean. Like it's awesome. Like we love it here. And it's kind of fun. Like we play Vietnamese traditional games, and we kind of talk about the culture. In the semester, okay. So you see how like it's already boiling. It doesn't take that long, but I want a lot of sauce, so I'm gonna add more water and more peanut butter. So this sauce will probably last like we always have extras, and you could just mix it in with rice, and like you have a pretty solid rice dish. But so I just added water, and I'm gonna add another huge dollop of peanut butter because this sauce is like it lasts in the fridge for like a week or like no like 2 weeks. So like it's good. So you keep on mixing it with that, and then by the time it's like kind of smoothish, by the time like the water and the peanut butter kind of like mix together and the peanut butter is all melted, you have this thing called soybean sauce. It's important to get the one called La Bode. You'll find it like anywhere in Vietnamese markets because it's really popular. Not Vietnamese, Asian supermarkets because it's really popular. And I also kind of go by the philosophy of dolloping it. So I just take it, I just put a bit in like that. And I take it off the heat, and then I mix it together. Not entirely sure why you need to take it completely off the heat, but that's how my mom taught me to do it. So I take it completely off the heat. And then also not completely mandatory if you don't like spicy, but this is sriracha. I'm matching it. So yeah. So you just like squirt it into the sauce as much as you would prefer it. I think it's pretty obvious to tell how much heat you need. Like I feel like everyone has some experience with sriracha. So as long as you kind of like gauge, you'll be fine. So now the sauce is done. Really easy. And I'm just gonna take a little bit out and put it in this little cup. This little cup, I'm just gonna put out there for later. But I'm making this for dinner for my family. So I'm just gonna leave a bunch on the stovetop for now. This is just for demonstration purposes. Yeah, okay. All right, so we're back to assembly station. And so we have our sauce. It's pretty simple. If you have questions about it, type it into the chat. It's like, I can answer them even though like I didn't give you exact measurements. Like I can tell you like a good way to figure it out. But after you make your sauce, you wanna kind of prep your ingredients and stuff. So I'm gonna be microwaving the rice noodles because I prefer it that way. As long as it's like not freezing, it will still taste good. It's a fresh thing, so it's good. I'm gonna be microwaving it, and I'll be talking about the pork and how you prep the rice noodles after I get back. So to go into more detail about the rice noodles, what we do for the rice noodles is we take them and then we soak them in water for however long you want. We went grocery shopping this morning, so when we woke up this morning, we tossed it into a little thingy, and then we put it in there. And after we came back, it was ready. It takes about like 15 to 20 minutes, but you could put it in for however. It won't destroy the noodles. And then that's just a trick for you to make sure that the noodles, when you boil them and cook them, it's like that. Like it's really fast. If you don't soak them, it just takes a little bit longer to cook them, like 5 to 6 minutes. But if you do soak them, it's just like that. Moving on to pork. So pork, if you're cooking pork and you boil pork, right? I think it's pretty self-explanatory because you just like toss it into hot water, but you just wait for the water to boil. I usually salt the water, and then I just toss it into the stove, and then I leave it in there for about like 5 to 6 minutes to test it. You can kind of see what I did to it. I poked a hole into the pork with my chopstick, and if there's no blood and if I can see no pinkness, then I'm good. While the rice noodles are being microwaved, I'm going to be cutting the pork. I cut them into really thin slices so that when I put them into the spring roll, it's easy to eat and assemble. So you can see like there's no paintness. As long as you kind of poke into your pork, you will see that if it's ready or not. They say like to be like safe, like if you plan to make a business out of these spring rolls, um, you could poke it in with a thermometer for and see if it's 165 degrees Fahrenheit for well doneness. That's like food prep thingy. But I'm gonna be completely honest, I've never done that. So as long as you kind of poke it, you will not get salmonella, and I can guarantee you that. So while I'm cutting, I'll go back to talking about VSA. So VSA meets on Thursdays from 7 to 8:30. What we do is that we kind of discuss Vietnamese culture, and we kind of learn about culture in a way that's fun. One of the most popular meetings is Fear Factor. And what we do is that we have these mini games that we play. Some of them are related to culture, some of them admittedly not. And then there are some foods that like people think are not like normal because they're not like normal to Western cultures and things like that, which is perfectly fine. But because of that, like they kind of come off as weird. For example, we tried black eggs, like the 1,000-year-old eggs. We tried chicken liver. Not too funky. We tried something weird, like certain type of pickled vegetables and such. So it's like sort of like a fun challenge to like come to your friends and see. But at the same time, we do talk about how this relates to the cuisine and what it means to us and where you eat them. So, for example, the black eggs, you can eat them with jiao, and jiao is like sort of like a staple in the Vietnamese household. So we talk about things like that. And we also talk about family dynamics in Vietnamese households as well, which I think is pretty important. A lot of Asian cultures have different relationships with their family dynamics and things like that. And the best way to kind of have those conversations is to have a place where we start off with the culture and then go into it. There's a show that we watched that kind of tackled sort of like the issues within the family dynamics, but also sort of the things that we wish that we had over in the US. Also, if you have like a really thick piece of pork, you can just cut it in half like that. It's not the most mind-breaking revolutionary thing in the world, but just a tip, because whenever you have anything too like wide and you roll the spring rolls, they kind of get smushed in together, and if you're presenting it, it's not pretty. But if you're not presenting it, it's consumable and enjoyable. So you don't need to cut it in half, but for presentation purposes, it's a fun thing to do. Also, some people don't like to use like the center pork loin or such. They like to use like pork belly. If I wasn't trying to stay a certain way, I'd be doing the same thing. But you can totally do it. It tastes just as good. And it still has the same effect. And in a lot of the culture, a lot of people do that as well. So moving on to the noodles and rolling. So I just finished cutting the fork and the noodles just finished microwaving, and I'll be back with the noodles. Just to say it, that was about 1 minute and 30 seconds. Again, as long as it's warm, it's okay. But again, it can also be room temperature. We just prefer it warm. And I'm gonna start assembling. So assembly, it's probably the most important part because like that's how you roll it. I have this kind of like water bowl. It's just like a really big bowl with hot water in it. Warm water, so like you don't like burn your little fingers. But you just dip it into the water and completely cover it with water. Just a quick dip like that, and you should be fine. And it should look like this. Certain brands will do different things with their rice paper. So the brand that I'm using right now is called Bamboo Tree Vietnamese rice paper. It does not break easily, and you can just dip it really quickly. But for, let's say, like a brand from Vietnam, where it's made with different rice and water and stuff, the brand that my mom brings home, you soak your fingers and you just put it all over the roll, and it's a lot thinner, so it breaks a lot easier if you let it sit. But it tastes better. I just if you're making this for someone to consume later, like your family, you would want to use something that's like store bought. So quick tip. So you take the rice noodles, right? And you create like a little strip right here, like a little divot on the end of the rice paper. My dad taught me a trick where you have the rice paper sit on the edge of the plate, like off the edge of the plate, so it's easier to just pick up. Again, this is not traditional, but it's definitely something that I did when I was like a little kid, and I can't stop doing now. This is the red leaf lettuce. I just chopped it up really roughly into little strips, and I'm gonna rip it even smaller, and put it on top. And I like to use sour mango. This is also not necessarily traditional. Like this is just one of those things that people do if they like it. Um, and you just put it on top of the lettuce. And something that is more traditional, I think, is cucumber. Sometimes people pickle the cucumber, but I don't like pickles, so I'm just using fresh cucumbers. For the pork, I'd use about 1 piece if I am using shrimp. And if I'm not using shrimp, I'd use 2 pieces. My brother hates shrimp, so I don't do that. I'm using 1 shrimp, but the thing is I cut it in half. So I just put it on top. And when you roll it out, you're gonna see like the bright red shrimp on top, and it looks so cute. So yeah. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna lift it and you're gonna pull the ingredients into it. You're gonna lift it and you're gonna cover it, right? Like that. Can you see that? Yes. And then you're gonna pull the corners on the side in, and then you're just gonna roll. This is how you roll a spring roll, not too complicated. What makes it pretty and what makes it not pretty is what's inside of it. And if you're using enough like veggies and stuff like that. I think the amount that I just used was fine. So that was like, if you followed along, it was a little strip of noodles, 1 piece of pork, 2 pieces of shrimp, 2 strips of lettuce, 1 piece of cucumber, and 1 piece of sour mango. I don't really like mint, so I didn't add the mint in. But if you can see, I have mint on the corner. The next one I'm going to be doing is for my brother. So I'm going to be making one without mint and without shrimp. So traditionally, when I have spring rolls, it's like a family bonding thing. It's more than just like a meal. We set out all the ingredients on a plate like this, and then everyone has their little sauce cup, and everyone has the ingredients spread out, and then you just pick and choose from the center while you have your big plate out. And while you're rolling, you can have conversations about how your day is going with your family. It's really important in Vietnamese families, traditionally, to have dinner and meals together. It's one of the things that, like, coming to America, my dad really emphasized. So we kind of always had like this as one of those things that we had to create memories. when my grandfather used to live in his house. He lives in Houston right now. He used to like look at our rolls and like talk about if they're too much, too little, and stuff like that. Oh, that's so nice. Whenever I heard of the American Taco Night when I was younger, I was like, I wish I had that. And then I realized that this was the American Taco Night, just different. So I really like that comment. But yeah, what was I gonna say? Yeah, so he would talk about like Vietnamese sayings about watching the pot when you're eating to reference like Vietnamese culture. So there's a saying in Vietnamese culture: you have to look at the pot and make sure that everyone else has enough food before you eat. Um, and I thought it was really interesting, and I really liked it. So I always remembered it, and I didn't have a hard time remembering it because he always brought it up. So it's just like one of those things you have a good memory about and bond over. So my brother really doesn't like shrimp. So as I said, I took 2 pieces of pork. Um, he also is pretty big on like bulking. He's like a workout kind of guy. So I like to put in sometimes more pork than necessary. But yeah, it's all about like your family and what you know about it. This is all customizable because they say cooking with love is the best way to eat food. And I think that's why food needs to be customizable, like Vietnamese food. So I like to put the mango on the end, like I did with the shrimp, for whenever someone doesn't like shrimp, because then you still have a pop of color um, without the shrimp. So yeah, and then so the last variation I'm making is for someone who just really likes to eat, uh, and that's for my dad. Um, and he's always eaten like a lot of meat when we were younger, but now he's moved on to like eating a lot of not meat. He's kind of like strayed from meat. So for this variation, I'm just not gonna use meat. Sometimes he adds meat, but for this variation, I'm just not gonna use meat because I know some people just don't like meat. So if you're sitting at a table with a Vietnamese family, um, let's say my Vietnamese family, and you don't see fried tofu like I mentioned in the beginning, what I usually do would be to really bulk up on whatever is the fruit or the veggies, and then put the sauce into the roll. So I'm gonna take a few sprigs of lettuce and I'm gonna put it on top as usual. And then I'm gonna take 2 pieces of cucumber instead of 1 piece of cucumber, and 2 pieces of mango instead of 1 piece of mango. And for the sauce, I'm lazy. So sometimes I don't grab a spoon. I don't need to grab a spoon. I just like push it into the roll. And that should be fine. You spread it around a little bit. You don't need a spoon. Um, and usually I just did it with chopsticks. So that's how you do it if you don't have meat and you still want some type of proteiny kick. Then you roll it into the roll, put it into the corners, and there's your roll. This one is not that pretty, I'll admit, but it still tastes good. So that's that. And so now that I finished rolling 3 rolls, I'm gonna be trying one of mine, and you'll see how it looks. So with the sauce, I'm just gonna dip into it. And then... Okay, so if there's no questions, I'll keep on talking about VSA. um, so other than just talking about things like food, so we do talk about things like sort of like expectations about the culture and things like that. Oh, how many spring rolls do you usually make in one sitting? So my brother again is a big bulk, like he's a weightlifter. So he'll eat about 10 spring rolls in one sitting. Yeah. I'm making him 10. Actually, while I'm going, I'll keep making them because I still got to make dinner. um, he'll eat about 10 spring rolls in one sitting, and that's not average. That's for someone who's like really hungry. You also don't just eat spring rolls. Bye, Mom. You don't just eat spring rolls. Sometimes there's a soup on the side and things like that. Oh, I forgot to mention, if you do make spring rolls with the boiled pork loin, you could use the boiled water as a soup base. I would just use that, salt it, and then put what veggies in, and then you have a Vietnamese dish called gai. Um, it's pretty simple, but I get like you just don't want to toss things into a pot. So if you guys want a recipe on that, just let me know. But yeah, so moving on from that, that's about 10 for someone who's like really bulking. For my grandfather, he ate about 4, and I used to eat a lot more, but now I eat about 4 too, and so does my mom. Um, and I think that's good. When you buy them at an Asian supermarket, they often give you 5, and that's also pretty normal and consumable. But for my dad, since he doesn't like always eat the meat, it really does depend. If he does eat meat, it's about like 5 or 6, 4 or 5, sorry. But if he doesn't eat meat, it's about like 10. Any other questions? Oh, and you can see that I'm using chopsticks with this. You don't really have to use it with the veggies. I'm just using them because I'm presenting. But like I don't usually just like take mango and put it on a chopstick or lettuce and put it on a chopstick. But yeah, that's a general idea for spring rolls. Also, if you're, oh, do you ever use tomato in the food? Oh, tomato. Okay, so my brother used to hate tomatoes. Um, so we didn't do it. But then over time, he got used to it, and now we do. But like I'm so used to doing it a certain way, so I stopped using the tomato. It's still really good, so I don't know why I stopped doing it. But yeah, I've seen people use using it with tomato. Um, it's really interesting because since moving to America, you have to kind of adapt with American ingredients. Um, and I know a family that uses ketchup, and they just kind of modify and work with the tartness of the ketchup to the sauce. So like they use a lot more peanut butter than I did, even though I use like half the amount of peanut butter. They use a lot more peanut butter, and they kind of like tone it down with sugar and things like that. So ketchup is actually works. I was really surprised about that, but I think it's interesting. I really like goikon because it's one of those things where you can always have a conversation about it. Um, so when I make goikon with my family, we always have like certain things we change and talk to each other about in relation to the goikon. Goikon, spring rolls. I mean spring rolls. um, we can talk about how like, oh, there's this type of pork from the store that would taste really good with this, or there's this type of ingredient that I think is really good with the shrimp or the peanut sauce. And interestingly, people really like to adapt with different cultures for spring rolls, I find. I know a family that used Korean barbecue meat, and they've kind of mixed Korean barbecue with this Vietnamese spring roll. It's really good. So you can always mix and match with these things. Was that a question? Sorry, I missed it. Where's the best place to get games? That's close to the Yukon. Okay. There's I don't know if you guys know the name of the store called Adong. I believe it's in. Let me look it up. It'll be very quick. Adong. Okay. It is in West Hartford, 160 Shield Street. It is the biggest Vietnamese Asian supermarket in like Connecticut, I think. Like I it's not even just Vietnamese. I find a lot of cultures can find the ingredients they can't find in American supermarkets in that store. Um, um, I can't speak for every African culture, but I do know that my friend does get oxtail from there and things like that. So yeah, it's like one of those stores where if you can't find it in an American supermarket, if you really want to go back into your culture and find stuff, that's where you go. Um, it was like kind of like a hub for Asian American like culture as well. I find like a lot of the trendy Asian snacks are there. But if you can't go there, there's also but it is okay. If you can't go there because it's closed right now, because of their suppliers from New York, um, and they can't get their supplies yet. Um, if you can't go there, there's also this place called Five Star Market. It's in West Hartford as well. You just look up Five Star, and it's also a supermarket. It's a lot smaller, but it still has a good amount of those ingredients. Um, Pork loin and shrimp and lettuce are things you could find like in American supermarkets, but with like the rice paper, you can probably find it in Five Star. Okay. Um, when we had my brother brought his American friends over to try to roll spring rolls, and they were very nervous about rolling them, as I think anyone would be nervous about them. But we found that as long, it's very similar to, I don't remember the name of the thing, but there's a Hispanic food that is very similarly rolled as the Vietnamese spring roll, just with very like the texture of the skins are different. I think so. Not sure. Probably, but it's rolled like basically the same way. And so as soon as we said that you roll it like that, and my brother showed it to his friends, they just started pumping them out like better than I could. So it's not that hard. As long as you kind of just talk to someone and figure out how it relates to you. I'm sure like it's not hard. But it depends on the person, of course. When I was younger, I hated rolling spring rolls, and whenever they broke, my parents were like, oh, "You put too much ingredients in," and that's probably the reason why they broke too. Um, when you're a kid, you kind of get like excited to make spring rolls and stuff like that. So you put in more pork than everyone else, and then it explodes, and everyone knows. If they break midway through rolling, like mine just did, there's like a hole right there. But move quickly, roll it, and then something will cover it up because you're rolling. So it will be not noticeable. So don't stop when you're rolling, and you will be fine. The biggest problem tends to be just you're using too many ingredients at once. So yeah, that's the main takeaway. For spring rolls, you can buy them, but I do think that it's more important for you to make them with people. Make it into a night, um, and kind of bond over it, and you'll enjoy it. Just like how you could probably bond and enjoy time together at VSA. I just want to go back into that and talk about that for a little bit because that's kind of how I got involved with doing this in the first place. Um, VSA is like sort of a home for a lot of people, and if you don't know something about the culture, it's a place where you can get started. A lot of people don't come in knowing Vietnamese. A lot of people don't come in knowing certain Vietnamese artists, food, cultural expectations, and even if you can't walk in knowing with that, you can learn with us. And it's a good place for someone who's like very Americanized to kind of figure out themselves. Um, when I was younger, my parents were like really big on pushing the culture for me, so I kind of knew sort of the Vietnamese aspect of Vietnamese American culture. Something I really missed out on was like actually understanding Vietnamese American culture, which sounds like nothing. Um, I thought it was nothing. Like I thought it was just being in America in Vietnamese. But there's certain things that I feel like when you meet other Vietnamese kids and at Vietnamese parties um, that your parents bring you to, there are certain things that you kind of pick up on. And I figured that I really missed out on kind of understanding that aspect of being Vietnamese American. So Vietnamese VSA kind of helped me with that as well. Kind of created a home, kind of created like a place to be, a place to make a connection with the sort of traditional aspects of my culture and with being a teenager and being normal about it. But yeah, so I think this kind of wraps up the idea of making a spring roll. But if you guys have any questions, I'd love to answer them. I can go into the soup, I can go into the sauce, I can go into whatever you want to talk about. Is there anything else? Oh, yay. Okay. So, talking about soup with a pork base. Um, in Vietnamese culture, you usually eat rice with another thing, like another added component of your meal. And one of those things is called canh, which is like a Vietnamese um, soup with veggies. Let's say I'm making Chinese spinach soup, right? Um, Water and spinach does not sound good. Like you don't want to consume a bowl of wilted spinach drifting in water. What makes it special is how you season it. You start off with the pork. Sometimes like you can use just like boiled pork water, or you could, or how I prefer to do it is like you take the bones and you kind of make a stock out of it. It doesn't have to be that fancy. Sometimes you could just make it really quickly. Um, you just put it into the water and you let the water like sit with it, and as soon as it starts boiling you take out the bones and then you start seasoning the water with other things. Honestly, Vietnamese seasoning is not that complex. It's mainly fish sauce, soy sauce, sugar, and pepper, and that's it. Like it's not that complicated. It's like just a clean soup, you know. And then after you put in um, a, about 2 dashes of soy sauce and fish sauce and sugar. Um, you let it boil, and then you throw in your vegetables right after it starts boiling. You put in the stems first so that it's soft, and then you put in the leaves afterwards because the leaves will cook a lot quicker than the stems. And so you'll have like a fresh and not like soggy vegetable soup. Um, Sometimes if you don't have like bones or like a center pork loin to boil with, you could just make the broth a little bit. You could season the broth with like freeze dried shrimp. That's something that my family has. What my family does is we take freeze dried shrimp and then we boil it with the soup and the veggies. And then after that, we fish it out and then we feed it to our pet turtle. So whatever you have, whatever is more accessible to you, as long as it makes the soup, you're good. um, and you would eat it with rice and a different type of meat. So yeah, that's basically it for the pork-based soup. Um, you shouldn't expect the the soup to carry your meal. So if you're making it, like it's gonna be a very boring one piece thing. So that's how we usually do it. After I make spring rolls, I would just use the base to make a soup on the side. Like it's always on the side. Um, for today, I didn't make the vegetable soup because I'd almost closed. So we ended up making bún riêu. It's a Vietnamese shrimp-based soup, but the pork water was like good for seasoning, and we didn't have to use that many shrimps. And then we just threw it in with some tomatoes, like a crap ton of tomatoes. And then we took some eggs and we mixed it in with some grounded pork. And then after the water's boiling with a bunch of seasonings, like there's like a moon reel seasoning mix. Um, After you mix it in with the seasoning, you just toss it in with you pour the eggs over the moon reel, and then that's how you make the sauce, the soup, and then you mix it in with noodles. So yeah.
I just want to take a minute to thank you so much for leading this demonstration, and I feel confident that if I were to rewatch a recording of this, that I could replicate those, which I definitely didn't think I could do before. So thank you so much for your incredibly detailed step-by-step instructions, and they look so delicious. I also want to just thank everyone else for joining us today on behalf of the Office of Yukon Global Affairs. Um, with this initiative, hashtag Yukon Global at Home, we're proud to continue to keep you connected with your global community from the safety of your home. And in order to continue doing so, we'd love to hear more from you. What does being global at home mean to you? Feel free to send us your videos or pictures at global@yukon.edu, or use the hashtag Yukon Global at Home and tag at Yukon underscore global on Instagram, or at Yukon Global, one word, on Twitter for a chance to be featured. Please keep an eye out in your inboxes for a survey that will be coming to you. Your feedback is highly valued, and we really appreciate you taking the time to fill those out in order to keep these sessions running and see what we can do to improve. So thank you so much. Stay healthy and stay safe, Huskies.